Hello, this is Ricardo Francis, the Venting Vigilante. It's good to be with you again today. Today we're going to talk about diplomacy and diplomats. Friends, the word diplomacy and diplomat has been around a long time, since the beginning of the century. Friends, I won't get into the specifics of at this particular point in time, due to time and limit in terms of making this video. But it is believed, friends, that diplomacy actually first started in Egypt, Cairo, Egypt, by an Egyptian. Subsequent to that, it is believed that the first embassy was set up in Italy. Of course, Latin or Italian was considered to be the first language of this diplomacy. Today, of course, friends, the language of diplomacy is French. Friends, the United Nations as we know it, which is a body that came about of course, at the end of World War II. Prior to that, we had the League of Nations. This is all, I'm all connecting the dots here for you, friends. Now, friends, you see, this whole issue of diplomacy and diplomats, embassies, ambassadors, consulars, charge d'affaires, what have you. Friends, there was a war, a 30-year war, which ended in 1648. And as a result of that war, there was an agreement that came about called the Westphalia Agreement of 1648. This is where the issue of sovereignty, nationalism, where countries started setting up borders, and as a result of countries becoming countries of their own entities, they of course required diplomats and embassies, of course, as a means of defending their particular national interests, negotiating agreements, protecting their rights of their citizens, of course, citizens of their country who would have now migrated to a new jurisdiction. Friends, as a result of that, the whole issue of diplomats and diplomacy has grown and advanced to the 21st century as we know it today. Friends, the fact remains as this. There were some countries, of course, in the world that were considered former colonies, whether it be French colonies, British colonies, and of course some of those countries, their diplomatic missions or their diplomatic negotiations from an international perspective were of course done by the colonial powers. But friends, as countries become independent, politically independent that is, they of course set up their own embassies and negotiated diplomatic arrangements on their own for their own purposes. Friends, a diplomat of course is a necessary part of the political process. To be a diplomat generally is a political appointment. In some countries in the world, of course, there are many different processes and procedures where diplomats are appointed and how they're appointed. Friends, of course, in some countries it is done as a means of a patronage appointment. You may have been a member of a particular political party, may have made significant and pivotal contribution, and as such you're given such an appointment. 2, you may be a family member of a particular government that is in office, and as such if you choose to build a dynasty, then you send out your sons and your daughters as diplomats, which is an unfortunate position because that will be legally classified as nepotism. Friends, one of the most common and significant means of choosing diplomats is done in the United States of America, where generally there is a hearing, where you of course have to be sanctioned by the whole legal process in the United States. Even if the President of the United States wanted to make a particular person a diplomat, he or she must go before a hearing. Friends, diplomacy has of course grown. Diplomacy, of course, in terms of diplomatic immunity, came about in 1849, and of course there are many diplomats around the world who have committed crime in their host countries, and of course they have imposed their diplomatic immunity. Friends, diplomacy, of course, is given further rights in the Vienna Convention of 1961. Of course, this was an agreement that was more or less initiated by the United Nations. Recently, in recent times, we have seen, since Donald Trump became president of the United States, we've seen his willingness, his determination to bring bring out North Korea out of the cold, so to speak. We see that whole diplomatic negotiations, and of course here in Canada, and North America for that matter, or some people can say globally speaking, the recent renegotiations of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, which is now the US Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. Friends, these are important components of diplomacy, of course. There are leaders in the world who have classified themselves as supreme diplomats, a supreme ambassador. And being an ambassador, of course, generally, is like being a minister of government, because you are considered to be an envoy and you are paid accordingly. Friends, I can go on, but for the purposes of this video, I shall end it here. Friends, it's always a pleasure to be with you. I love you. I love sharing these moments with you. See you next time.